We've all seen white line issues before, but normally they don't take this path out. Welcome back to Nate the Hoof Guy. Now, most of the time, white line issues will cause the sole to separate and they will track out the top near the heel bulb. Now, in this case, this one is actually tracked up underneath that outside wall. So it's taken a different path than usual. While the track is different, the one thing that is the same is that we have loose horn here that needs to be taken away. So we're just going to work our way up this outside wall very carefully, removing anything that might be loosed, any detached hoof horn. That way we can get in there and clean this area out. Now, a lot of times we're going to have corium that's disturbed on the sole. In this case, there can be corium involvement on this outside wall. So we have to carefully remove any loose horn, find those areas that could be exposed, and treat those eventually as we get this all removed. What we're looking for here is the end of that track, meaning the end of that little tunnel that worked from the sole up that outside wall. Once we find the end of that, we know that's as far as it's separated, so we just thin those edges out all the way around. By spraying this out, I'm going to be able to see that a little clearer. I can continue to work along those edges, making sure that this is nice and smooth and clean. Now, while this is certainly a problem that needs to be addressed, this is not the foot that she's favoring the most. That would be her left front. We'll get to that next. Up near the top of this track, there is a little bit of corium involved, so we're going to continue to thin this area out, make sure we have all the edges cleared out around that little spot, and we're going to spray it and put a block on that other claw. Now, when you're working on these tracks, you don't have to make sure that it's completely white all the way across there. All we're trying to do is make sure that there's no corium involvement in that track. If I were to continue to work here, I would thin that down even further. I don't need to necessarily do that. I just need to make sure that there's no corium involved in those cracks. We're going to clean out this little white line here, spray this thoroughly, and then we're going to get that block on that other claw. Now with that block applied, we'll finish cleaning up this white line. We'll get this foot wrapped, and then we'll move on to foot number 2, which, as I mentioned earlier, was the one that she's favoring the most. With this hoof, you can see we've got some separation here. That is going to track down to that white line. But first, we've got to check the white line on that lateral claw. Why did I need to check the lateral claw first when I know the problem's in this claw? Because I need to make sure that that lateral claw is sound enough to carry a block. If not, it's going to change the way I approach this particular claw. Now, how did I know that that mark was going to be in the white line down here, not up here? Because that separation is below that mark up there. So what does that mean? That means typically if the lesion were higher up in that claw, we would see separation all the way up toward the heel bulb. But because that separation is down below that mark, chances are that is not the area we're looking for. In fact, it's lower in the white line right here. You can see that discoloration right in that junction there. Now, typically, that's where we would find a pocket of fluid or something like that, and likely at one point there was. But there's a fresh layer of hoof horn over the top of that. So there's really no problem here except some really soft hoof horn where that little white line defect was. They can heal on their own. This one actually has as far as hoof horn, but she's favoring this foot because that area is still so soft underneath and that hard hoof horn on the top is pushing down on that sensitive area. So we're going to take that area away, pair that away with our hoof knife, remove any of the hoof horn that's there. That way, this small soft spot won't have any ground contact. Any pressure that is applied to this claw will be applied above and below it. And we're also going to put a block on that other claw to take the weight off of this completely, just to rest it for a little while. Now, once we get this front foot done, we are not done yet. We have yet another front foot to work on. Now, if you're still questioning this mark up above, we're going to clean that out as well, just so you can see there is nothing there to worry about. Now, with this block applied, we are going to send her on her way and let her test drive her 2 new tires. Well, she's certainly walking much better. Now on to cow number 2, foot number 3. With this one, both of these claws could use some work, but I'm pretty sure this one's the problem, more specifically right about here. So how am I able to pinpoint a problem when both of them look the way that this one does? Well, it really boils down to statistics. Generally speaking, cows are going to have problems on the inner claw of the front feet, just the way that the pressures are applied and the ground force is applied to those when they walk. Now, as far as location, I'm looking typically first in the white line. Are there any flaws that are plainly visible, and in what locations? This one fits the bill. It's right where it should be. And you can see there's that mark, and you can see the shading up above it. So we're just going to continue to trim, and this will open up and we'll be able to see it much clearer. Now, just because probabilities point you to that medial claw doesn't mean you can completely disregard the lateral, as we saw in that first trim, right? That problem was in the lateral claw. But this one, as we started to trim, was very evident in that medial, so that's where we focus our attention now. The rocks you see in the white line there are not what caused this problem, but could be a contributing factor as far as how it tracked. Do you notice any similarities with that first hoof from today's video? Yes, this one too is deciding to track up that outside wall, or rather underneath that outside wall. One thing that is unusual about this one is that it's on the medial claw. But wait, you just said typically you're going to find these problems on the medial. Yes, however, it's rare for this type of lesion where it works underneath that outside wall to be found on the medial claw. Typically when that happens, it's going to be on the lateral. Why? I'm not exactly sure, but generally that's where you find them. So even though we've worked on a lot of feet, it's still hard to pinpoint exactly what causes these certain lesions in these particular locations or causes them to track the way they do. I could speculate, but I'm just not positive. One thing I do know for certain is we need to follow this track all the way out the top or until it terminates. That way we can eliminate further future complications in that area. Now, even though there was very little corium disturbed, we are going to use a block here, take the weight off of that other claw. What we're dealing with these wall type issues is that's how that weight is transferred from the inside of the foot down to the sole through the wall. So if we remove a section of that, we want to be able to rest that, let that remodel, fill back in. We'll use some salicylic acid to make sure there's no dermatitis interference there. But we're going to get that foot wrapped up, and she too is done.